using silicone anywhere, and there are places where we need a little. I think one of them is in here on this yoke and these splines. So nothing's worse than to rebuild your parts, have everything all brand new, and you end up with just a little weeping of gear oil coming out of the... It actually doesn't leak around the seal, it'll leak through the splines and come out around the nut. So here's kind of my solution. It's just a little RTV. I'm trying to get it only in the top half of the splines, not all the way down inside there. Got to get her in there where it's going to be enough to rub and to get things kind of clean so it'll stick. Not so much so that you end up with a bunch going down into this front bearing. The front bearing actually gets lubricated through this. There's a channel inside there. So if it's slung around by the rear gear and pushed right up inside of this thing. So now I want to be careful. I did put some red grease around this, got it all readied up. And then we just have to line it up. So there you go. It's not a whole lot of silicone there, just enough. If you put too much and you have to take this thing back apart, it's going to be tough. Of course, we're going to red Loctite these threads, and we're going to use a brand new nut. I did get my inch-pound rolling torque or rolling resistance torque wrench in, so we can set the preload on this bearing, which is awesome. So next step, clean up this washer. Run this on. Put this back on my grease so it doesn't go everywhere. There we go. Now, yep, the controversial impact and the housing. Come on. And up. Oh, and you guys keep on. We're going to have to do this 14 dozen times. Loctite. Clean the threads. Loctite in the nut. Come on. Alright, so, yep. Didn't really want to put quite that much Loctite on there. It'll take like 6.5 months for this stuff to dry. It's the only bad thing about the Loctite. It'll go down there and intermingle with our silicone and everything else. This dude will be hard to get apart, which is what you want if you do this right. You don't want to be taking your diff apart every other weekend just for the heck of it. If this thing comes back apart, it's going to be probably because of noisy rear gears, because the actual gears were noisy. Watch Eric the car guy, he'll show you what happens. Yeah, this is when it starts. So how do you tell when you're getting close? Because all I'm doing is I'm watching the socket turn and I'm feeling that pressure. And there is very little right now, but far as rolling resistance, we're not there yet. I'll tell you that just from experience. Alright guys, so I'll show you it can happen with an impact. You just have to be very, very careful as you get into that last little bit. I like this little torque wrench here. It's got that little memory needle on it. So you just roll it around and it'll kind of tell you the highest reading that you got. So I want to roll it, I'm going to roll it 360 here. My rear end's trying to slide. Alright, so I've went around. And we are, man, it's like 26 maybe. So, but when this needle touches, like, I don't know if you can see that, but the little black needle is on the outside of the actual needle that's doing the reading. So I think we're close. I think it feels good. We're gonna run it. All right, so everything is set in here just the way it was previous to putting the real bearings on the pinion and crushing the crush sleeve. So I still don't have my caps bolted down, but I've got enough preload on this thing. It stays pretty well exactly where we want it. Try not to jostle you guys around too much here, but I want you to be able to see that backlash setting. So we're right there. We're about 1/8 thou, looks like. Maybe on the small side, actually. Definitely not too big. We're at 0 there. We come over and we hit 8. So that is the right in the middle. So, all right. Hey, all I have to do is get my caps torqued in. Painting all your stuff, make sure that you lay your specs down right beside where you're painting, and don't cover up this, you know. Make sure this is the part that gets overspray, the torque spec part of it. So here we are. We've got a 7/16 carrier bolt that says 60 to 65 foot-pounds. So we take our little gadget here, the Quinn, and we can slow press and move it up. Just whatever you think, or you can hold it, it'll flash, and then we got to be to whoa, not 67, fool. 65 will be plenty. Okay, and I don't know exactly how to get you where you can really see this. Turn it on. It's already should be set to our torque reading. We're after 65 foot-pounds. And we just crank it around. 1, 2, 3, 4. Come on. All right. So we got 65 there. You know, should I Loctite those bolts? My little hook down here. See my little hook? Yeah, fancy. It's a piece of a cattle panel cut up and bent. Got the good Irwin quick grip here. Just hooking it there, hooking it back here. Got the fancy camouflage strap holding the thing down to the table. Yeah, with jack stands under it. Did have a towel over here. Scratched our beautiful brand new paint job, but it's easy to touch up. I know a guy. At any rate, I'm gonna work my way around because I think I've done 3 bolts trying to figure out how to not fight this, and I don't know, there's a couple more there. So at any rate, we'll probably set up a little, maybe a time lapse. Torqued in place here. Gauge is set up, so 0. Come back around. We're right at that same 7.885432 there, or we're going to call it a tight 8th thou. So it's going to be good enough. It's going to run. I think the very last thing that I need to do here, I have, by the way, checked this in 4 different positions, and all of them seem to be very, very close to the same, down to the point where it becomes that human factor. Got to go through and get my gear marking compound on here, kind of see what our pattern looks like on the gears. I got it right in that sweet spot right now, and you like to always put a little pressure on your gear, the ring gear, carrier, whatever, as you're turning, and you can see we're pretty centered up there on this. I think we're going to be okay. And then the back side, or the coast side of it, also looks very nice still. So hey, it's time to button it up. Alright guys, so I'm getting ready to put the axle bearings inside of our housing here, and I have the bearing. You can see it's a Koyo brand bearing, and then I also have the seal here that backs it up. So I don't have any kind of a driver set or anything, but I do have a bunch of sockets. So if you're familiar with working on four-wheel drive vehicles, this is a socket to loosen up the locking nuts for the wheel bearings on a four-wheel drive. If you see, I mean, it's just slightly smaller than that axle bearing is, so it works good to go ahead and drive it into the housing. I'm actually going to use this piece of wood here to start driving that bearing in and be gentle with it, make sure that it gets started straight inside of my actual housing for my differential. I will apply a little bit of red Loctite around the bearing. Loctite's not really a sealer, it's to lock bolts in place, right? But I just put a liberal bead of it around this bearing, and this will both lock it in that housing, keep it from moving, fill in any irregularities, and it will seal up small gaps. So I try not to get any of it on the actual rollers themselves, but I cleaned the outside of this with brake clean. I didn't clean the bearings. All right, guys. Hey, man, we got a lot done today. It wasn't like tearing a car completely apart and bolting it back together, but we got this thing all set up and put together, Loctited, and good to go. I mean, just listen. I can't even make it move. There we go. 8,000, so I think that's what the last reading we got was. Then, you know, we got the cover. Back in my video where I serviced this thing, I did use silicone, and I glued that gasket back on there. So now we have a cover with a gasket that we can just toss on here. When I put it together the first time, I didn't put any silicone at all on the actual differential housing, so it made it super easy to take apart. And hopefully it doesn't leak. I hate leaks. If it leaks, I will silicone it or